complicated chain of association for Dumke because it evokes and in some cases clearly quotes little bits of several pieces by Brahms and Dvorak. And this is where, thank God for the newspapers and thank God for computers, now there are so many highly developed digital archives, especially where the major metropolitan newspapers are concerned. And of course, the British press being what it has always been, that's a lot of material. I now know a great deal about what she was playing with the English ensemble over their whole career together, but in this case, particularly in their final season. And the last concerts that they played together involved two of the three pieces that she quotes in Dumke. And there's also a close association that I now forget with the third of them, but that involves a solo that she was famous even from back in the 1910s for her beautiful playing of. So I think in a way, it may have been a kind of backhanded, indirect tribute piece at a time when she was hungry for London and desperately homesick and all this stuff. I can't prove it. The documentation is there, but it's by association. But it is a striking association. It's very striking. But as for the four different versions of that cadenza, I really don't know. And we stewed over a great deal with the printed edition and finally just came up printing all the principal alternatives and said any editorial choice is bound to be speculative. So any speculative performance choice is at par. So here's all the material. It all seems to have equal authority. It's all equally viable. You know, there's nothing that's clearly impossible or undesirable or inconsistent and clashing about it. So, hey, here it is. Wanted to put it forward, or she'd had an opening for it. She would have made a choice. She would have worked out maybe something quite different from all four of them. I don't know. But right, you know, in a way, I wish that could have happened because I'd love to see what she finally landed on, because it's a scorcher of a piece. Oh my word. That happens much later in 2015 when a very well-known English violist and writer about the viola and biographer of Lionel Curtis named John White died in London, and his widow Carol started going through his papers and his vast collection of manuscripts and printed editions, and she came across 3 manuscripts by Rebecca Clarke, 2 of which were the well-known Lullaby and Grotesque. So she knew how to get in touch about that. She went to Oxford University Press because she knew about the publication. The third one was something called Irish Melody. She couldn't find any reference for that. So she mentioned that in her initial contact with OUP. Well, by then I had retired from the press, but they still stay in touch. And they immediately forwarded the information to me. I got right on the computer and got in touch with her and said, my God, I think you've solved a mystery here, because this Irish Melody pops up a time or two in her diaries. And I have subsequently come across a review of it, in a highly favorable review of it, and of Clarke's playing of it in a newspaper review. So it's been a great mystery. It's been killing me. what have you got? What have you got? What have you got? Well, she has this lovely manuscript here. She didn't know where it came from. She had no idea. Apparently, White was a great collector, but he wasn't always meticulous about recording provenance. So we have no idea how he got hold of it or who had it before or how it's unmistakably in Clarke's hand, all three of them. But how it got from Clarke to whomever else, to John White, absolutely no idea. As you know, we had reprinted Lullaby and Grotesque as a pair in 2005, I think it was. And they were always configured as an integral pair. I mean, Clarke always said, you can play them separately if you like, but they are meant to be a pair in that sequence, Lullaby, Grotesque. After she started making alternate versions for violin and cello for her friends, the Izard sisters, in the 1920s, there was a sort of mix and match. Sometimes they would do Grotesque by itself, or Grotesque followed by Irish Melody, or Lullaby and then Irish Melody as an encore, that sort of thing. But that was the Izards. Clarke herself never did it that way. So the initial publication and the republication, as it turned out, made conceptual and artistic sense. And as I say, when we did the new edition in 2005, we had no inkling and wouldn't know for another decade that Irish Melody was anything other than a lost thing existing as a figment in the diary. So when it popped up, yeah, the question of publication immediately rose, because you look at the thing, and of course you know it well and have now recorded it, and you think, oh my God, this is meltingly beautiful. And this is the kind of thing that anybody who hears it will just want to do. It's got Drop Dead Encore written all over it. You just can't do better than this. But I shopped it around in all the usual ways, and I don't know why nobody was interested. There is some faint thing where, and this gets into the whole Anthony Trent thing, where she makes a little bit of a show of this Anthony Trent piece, which was Morpheus, being very much the worst of her pieces that were on that program. But that's the sort of, I mean, bear in mind, she's English. She's self-deprecating by nature. There is clear evidence that she kept the piece active for some years after the premiere in New York in 1918. There is documentary evidence, excuse me, that she promoted it in a backhand kind of way, because when the news broke about the tie with Bloch, with the sonata at the Coolidge Festival, she needed to give an account for herself to the newspapers and the magazines, and she was desperate for any work she could cite to just, add to the story there. So she blew the whistle on herself and revealed herself as the actual composer of Anthony Trent's Morpheus from the year before, I think hoping people would not have remembered that actually Morpheus kind of got the back of the hand in the reviews, and it was her pieces that got all the favorable attention. But at any rate, she claimed that as a sort of interesting story, and then exaggerated a bunch of other things that were true or true enough as far as they went, but weren't quite as grand as she made them sound. But anyway, she was willing to mention the piece in publicity. You may remember from one of the autograph copies that I sent you, she's got scrawled all across the title page in a great big hand, Rebecca Clarke, 67 Finchley Road, Northwest, on it. And this looks like you know, here I'm giving this out to somebody to try it out or to play it, but I want it returned to me, return it to me here. Well, this was the home of a very wealthy family called the Howards, originally from Canada, but long resident in London, who had a very grand house at 67 Finchley Road. And they kept a sort of combination open house salon for all the top flight musicians to come and play chamber music virtually every night. So, and Clarke actually lived there from time to time when she was between tours, and was welcome there at all times. But this clearly means, bearing in mind she was in the United States from 1916 until 1920, because of the war, she couldn't get a visa back for a long time. So any return of the manuscript of Morpheus to the Howards at 67 Finchley Road pretty much would have to anticipate her being there, which means 1920 or later. So that's gotten us at least 2 years down the road from composition. And after that, it sort of disappears from the record. If there are further performances, either they were not reviewed, or they were not advertised, or I have not found those reviews and ads yet. Nothing would surprise me. It could pop up at any moment. Things do in the digital age, but it kind of slopes off. My guess is, since even with something as modern and progressive in many ways as the sonata, even the most favorable reviews were already saying it sometimes speaks, the exact phrase won't come to me, but an older vernacular. So this whole sort of impressionist, slow-moving, nocturnal, Debussy-tinged kind of thing is she's already moving away from that. And the fashion is moving away from it very quickly. If you consider the difference between the sonata and the trio just 2 years later. And also, if you consider her continued involvement with Ernest Bloch and his music, which got her off into a whole different, spiky, more dissonant, sharper kind of thing. I think Morpheus may have just seemed, one of her favorite expressions, a little bit old hat after a while. So she may not have performed it as much. And if in that case, you know, if she's not fully behind it or actively behind it herself, it's not going to be something at that early stage in her publishing career that she's going to be flogging to publishers. So it may just have drifted away back into the pile.